2023 at 6:30 p.m. If you would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience this evening who is audio or video recording? If you could just raise your hand and indicate so. And I see no one. Thank you very much. We'll go to Selectmen's comments and announcements. Mr. Ward.
Yes, Madam Chair. I'd like to point out that the third annual Taste of Winchendon is this Saturday, May 13th, from noon to 4 p.m. on the Beals Memorial Library lawn. Everyone should step out for this and help us celebrate Winchendon's many cultures and traditions. There's great food, there's entertainment. What a great way to spend an afternoon on Saturday, and it's free. So we really need to come on down and enjoy that. I would also like to thank the Earth Day cleanup folks, the volunteers, and the Board of Health members who came out and tried to clean up some of this town, and that's really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Lapointe?
I do. I got a message from a citizen. I'm trying to pull it up. I apologize. It was also one of the candidates in the recent election. They wanted to express their concern. Hi, Danielle. Sorry I may not be able to make it in today. I was hoping you could state they would like to discover why, quote, there were 1,810 votes for school committee and only a little over 400 for the selectmen. Why the gap in the number? I think as a community we should research and find out why they decided to vote for school committee and not selectmen. I did indicate my opinion that sometimes people will choose to not vote for a certain position as opposed to vote for one of the choices, but that I would relay the concern, and so I am relaying the concern.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
I think I also was reached out by a citizen, and the same sense, you know, some people will vote for a particular board or committee and not others, and depending on if you have multiple, how many candidates you have and such. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. Anything further?
Just the Taste of Winchendon. I hear a really good band is playing.
We won't name drop. Mrs. Anderson.
I think, you know, to piggyback on the Earth Day cleanup, I'd also like to thank the Board of Health members and Jamie Abear for working really hard. That's a lot of work, and they all did a great job. And they also volunteered their time.
Agreed. Anything further?
Nope.
Thank you. I would just like to, a general shout out. You know, the elections were a week ago today. A big thank you to everyone who threw their hat in the ring and made the effort to step forward. A big thank you to those who came out and voted. A big thank you to the workers, the people who work at the polling place. It's a long day. I expected Amy Salter to be here this evening. Have you heard that she's not, so she may just be running late. So since she's not here, we can talk about her. Amy, her term expires, and she will not be able to be at our next meeting, so this would be her last meeting. I want a huge thank you out to her. Her financial background, her grasp of numbers, and everything will be missed, and just a huge thank you to Amy for what she's done for the board.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Ward.
Yeah, I would also, you know, actually over the years since I've been on the board, Amy's been here, and I've benefited greatly from her knowledge, her consistency, and her well-thought-out input to this board. Literally, she was my right-hand person. And I will miss her greatly, but I also welcome Melissa Blanchard, who's be joining the board.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, public comments and announcements. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to come forward and address the board? I saw Mr. Lucio's hand first, and then, Mr. Mike, oh.
Aw.
Very nice, yes. For the record, please state your name.
Yes, Jane Lapointe from Winchington. This may be a little bit premature, but I thought I would imagine that the Select Board is going to be taking up the question for yourselves and us at some point in time about recruiting a new town manager and what it is we're looking for in that person. And I'm just expressing my hope that going forward, that we're looking for someone who has the ability to function as a manager, to manage the operations of a town, and also someone who is a leader, who can lead with vision and looks ahead to what's possible and isn't afraid to go after that. My concern is to see us in a situation where we don't take on the kind of projects that we've been taking on of late and sort of kick the can down the road until we end up in a place where we've got to take care of things. And I appreciate what's been happening in the last few years to deal with things, to address them, but also to look at things that are new, that would advance the position of the town economically and as a place to live, that speak well for the pride that people have in their town. So that's all I really wanted to say. And I look forward to hearing down the road as more comes out about what the search process will be and what we'll be looking for and all of that. I would imagine that will be made public at some point, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lucia? Did she steal your thunder?
Good evening, Rick Lucia, 36 Maple Street. Following Jane's thing with the change in circumstance, I would recommend that the Board of Selectmen look at Article 9 and maybe either pass over or rescind Article 9, because with the change in the town manager, I don't think it would be fair to bring a new town manager in and have to take on reorganization that is in another person's mind that already had this all set up, and to throw his successor in there to implement a plan that he has no knowledge of. So, you know, with all the changes that were put in Article 9, which aren't listed here, but have been, you know, given out in some more detail than what is on the warrant, that you might consider rescinding that and let the new guy figure out how to do it on his own. He may not want to be the planning and development personnel. He may want to just come into the job, get up to speed, and then maybe do some of those changes. But to throw him into the fireball that he's going to go into to start with and then add this on top of it, I don't think would really be fair. So I would just suggest that maybe you pass over or just rescind the article in entirety.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mrs. Lapointe.
if I may, just to respond to Mr. Lucier, I just want to comment that I share some of the reservations. The vote I made to recommend was based on two specific people being in the position to start it off. So I just want to say that I hear you and I share some of the reservations.
Any other public comment or announcements?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Saltzback?
She forgot you already.
Yeah, wow.
How quickly?
Just to weigh in on some of those thoughts, and Mr. Lucier, I appreciate that. So the items in that article, I just want to stress to this board, obviously it's at the pleasure of the towns, whatever the town wants, but I would stress from a management perspective that it's imperative that that goes through, and I'll tell you why. The piece with the shared DPW and school director, that was not mine. That was not my vision. That was me reacting to something that came forward from the schools. And it was also the product of an independent group made up of members of the Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, and school committee. That was not mine, and I would recommend that that go through. There's a cost savings there, and it would be foolhardy to let that die on the vine. The other piece, the economic development component, I do agree it's not fair to just throw somebody into that, and as a matter of fact, that's what happened to me about 10 months ago, and I figured it out and the world kept turning. So I understand your reservations there, but I think the benefit is, for the town, having me in the seat at that time, you're really lucked out because I had a background that I had experience in that. You have a unique opportunity now where you can specifically seek out and hire an individual that has that background, so you're not relying on luck, you're creating your own luck. I think that's an important component. And then the planning and development changes, same thing, it happened one way or another. It wasn't my vision, it was a matter of the market and trying to find employees. And that's not gonna change no matter who's sitting in the seat that I'm presently sitting in. And that's actually the way that we've been running as an organization for the better part of a year anyway. And then the last piece for the rec position, that position is here. It's already here. So it's not really a matter of me, shaking things up and passing it on. It's already been shook up. And now, if anything, you have the benefit of even footing when you're going out to hire someone to fill my shoes. But thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on. We have no public hearings this evening. Under appointments and resignations, we have 2 items. The first is the resignation of Don O'Neill from the Winchton Historic Commission. States he just currently doesn't have time to give to the board at this time. Certainly thank him for all that he's done. What are you trying to do?
I'll text him.
Any questions or comments?
Other than a thank you and sorry to see him go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dawn has been so important to not only the historic district, but the historical society, and he really is phenomenal. So it's such a loss.
Agreed. If there's nothing further, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward?
I move to accept the resignation of Don O'Neill from the Winchton Historic Commission and thank him for his service on that committee.
Second.
Thank you. Made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 And the chair votes aye. Next is our list of appointment renewals for July 1st, 2023. Are there any positions that are still open that the current people did not want to continue on?
Madam Chair, I've reached out to the chairs of the boards just to see if they're interested in reappointing these people, and then to speak to them to see if they wish to be reappointed. So we've got that ball rolling. I think there's a few meetings coming up this week and next week, so we're just trying to iron out the list so we can have it ready before probably the first June meeting.
Okay, thank
This
you.
is just for review.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Anderson?
but we appoint them. And so you're reaching out to the chair to see if they would recommend that appointment?
Yes, just seeing if they're of value to the committees and whatnot, and if the people wish to be reappointed. And if they don't wish to be reappointed, then there's nobody to appoint.
And have we reached out to them individually?
I've reached out to all the chairs, and they're going to reach out to the individuals, and then we'll reach out to them all before the June 8th meeting. So we'll have a clean list as to who's seeking to be reappointed, and then we'll bring it in front of you for your recommendations.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the board?
I don't know.
Yes.
I think that's really not the way that we've done things. And I'm just, thinking, what if a member of a board had a problem with the chair, there was a personality conflict, and by reaching out to the chair for his recommendation, you know, that's not normally what we do. I don't think there's any problem currently, but I'm just trying to anticipate, is that the process we want to take going forward?
Is that process outlined in maybe our policies and procedures?
I think my understanding is that we'll reach out to the chair, and if they recommend, then we would reach out to the person to find out if they wish to be reappointed, then we send them a letter. But then we first have to bring it in front of you people, the Board of Selectmen, for your approval.
Right. We can look at that. and-
Can you, yeah, check with Linda?
Yeah,
And just see what our usual policy is.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so these will be coming back before us, but there's a heads up. Thank you very much on that one. Moving on, we have some entertainment permit licenses and applications. First up, Parks and Recreation for a movie night at the Winchendon Community Park. This would be June and July. And good evening.
Hello.
All right. So we've got June 22nd, June 29th, July 6th, 13th, 20th, and 27th. Okay. And those are a Friday night, Saturday night?
Thursday night.
Thursday
They're all
night.
Thursdays. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me.
No issues from police chief or et cetera. Questions, comments from the board?
Madam
Madam
Chair?
Mrs. Lapointe, then Mr. Ward? Or Mr. Ward, then Mrs. Lapointe?
Go ahead.
These are free, right? Free to the public?
There's actually is a cost to these events, so it's $5 per one, or you can come to all six for $25.
Okay, so we're charging for this. Have you checked with the library to make sure this doesn't conflict with their movie nights?
Yes, I did speak with them. So they typically have all of their movie nights, the 3 main ones that they do in August. I know last year they did teen ones, but they happen after their 3 movies. So we are doing June and July. So we'll do it before them, and then theirs will be in August.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Do you have a time for starting these?
So right now they're listed as starting at dusk.
Dusk.
My guess would be around 8. People can show up at 7 if they want, get settled.
Okay. What's
you-
the longest of the movies? Do you know? I'm just thinking about the sound for the neighborhood. just
Yeah,
to
I'm
get a
not sure
sense.
the exact time frame. I think the longest movie that we have is going to be Black Panther,
Okay.
Wakanda Forever, but I'm not sure the exact time frame. I do believe that's the longest
Okay, a
movie.
couple hours in at least, okay. Just, Mrs. Lapointe?
So I understand the need to make the amphitheater self-sufficient, but I'm just relaying what a handful of citizens have expressed to me, and that's all this is relaying, is a little, I guess, dismay is the word at, and I know 5 isn't a lot, but at the cost of doing a movie night, a family movie night at the amphitheater. They have mentioned when it's, available at the library for free, just relaying, not judging.
Absolutely. I also want to reiterate, 5 and under are free. I don't think I said that. To help make it more cost-effective for families. And I do understand that the library does them for free as well. We're obviously doing different movies, and it's a different atmosphere, we hope. That's the goal. And yes, the big point is that we can't do everything for free. We need to have some sort of income to sustain ourselves, but we are trying to make it as cost-effective as possible. Thank you.
I know I've seen postings out there of all the free, because there are a bunch of free events
There are
on the
also tons
calendar.
of free
Maybe
events.
not necessarily a movie, but a lot of other things going on there, or what have you.
Correct. And we are trying to get some more additional funding in different ways to kind of amp up some of the more free events that we can offer. But we definitely have a full list of events. You can get that, I believe, online. You can check our website. You can come in my office and get a paper copy if you want. There's definitely tons out there.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Anything further from the board? Mrs. Anderson?
What are you going to do if it's raining?
So the movie nights, we didn't put them on here, because we need to get the licensing, so we have to go through the whole process, and we need to get that started. But we do have the opportunity to pick rain dates with the licensing, but we did not plan for that as of yet. But that's something that we can discuss, because we don't want to not have them. We definitely still want to continue to have them when the weather is appropriate, but we have to look at our schedule too, because again, we're not trying to push them out if it rains, because we don't want to interfere with the library. And during the summer, we have lots of things, Fridays, Saturdays, and even Sundays coming up. So it's just a matter of picking dates that we can hold them as rain dates.
Thank you. Anything further from the board? If there's none, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward,
I move to approve the Winchendon Parks and Recreation's entertainment permit for movie nights for June 22nd, June 29th, July 6th, July 13th, July 20th, and July 27th as presented this evening.
Second.
thank you. Made and seconded to approve. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Next, also Parks and Recs, for July 16th, the medium Bonnie Page, scheduled to be at the Winchton Community Park. This one, you did note a rain date on that, so this is at 2 in the afternoon. It is a ticketed event. How much of the tickets, has it been set yet?
The tickets are $25 a piece.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any issues from department heads. Questions, comments from the board?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward?
So the $25 fee, do we make a profit on that, or is this just enough to pay the medium?
This one will be a profitable event for the amphitheater.
Okay.
Yes. Some of our events are not. We charge to cover the fee, and
Pass
that's it.
through
But
the
this one
fee.
actually is, will generate a profit as long as, we sell enough
As long
tickets.
as you get folks out.
Right.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mrs. Lapointe.
has she graciously reduced her fee? I think I remember seeing her fees at 25, right?
Yeah, so I'm not sure what her fees are, because she didn't straight out tell me. She just said, tell me how much you can afford to pay, essentially, like, what's your budget? And I said, is our budget like an affordable price for you? Like, I told her what it was, and she said yes. So,
All right, well, if she's reduced, just a thank you to her. That's it.
yes.
Now, I see a note, food service, personalized
Oh,
charcutier. Does it say it?
charcuterie.
Charcuterie.
We're still working on that. We're not sure that's 100% going to happen.
Okay,
But that's something that our committee wanted to offer with the tickets, but we're having a difficult time figuring that out, but it's still a possibility. And I believe at this event, Wachusett
Right
is
there.
going to set up with wine for purchase at this
Okay.
event in the afternoon.
all right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward?
Move to approve the Winchendon Parks and Recreation entertainment permit for medium Bonnie Page to be held on July 16th with a rain date of July 30th.
Second.
Made and seconded to approve. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have a request for a solicitor's permit for a poppy flower sale, the Women's Auxiliary from the American Legion 193. This would be at To Each His Own Design, Gracie's Thrift Store, and Cumberland Farms, Monday through Thursday.
Madam Chair?
Mrs. Anderson, sorry, I am way off tonight.
My only question is with the construction on Central Street, and you know, I know that the businesses are still open, and I would hope that they do well, but hoping it doesn't get very confusing in that particular area.
Understood, yeah.
Madam Chair, I know that the applicant, Tina Santos, was going to be here tonight, but she couldn't make it because of a family issue. We did get permission from the flower shop and the thrift shop, and Cumberland Farms can only do a verbal. They don't put anything in writing, but she said if that becomes an issue with the board, she can certainly just disregard that location.
Well, no, I think Cumberland Farms is the one I have the least amount of concerns
Yeah,
about.
yep. I know they have allowed it there before, and he had verbally said that they had no problem with them doing it.
Okay,
And they're also off of the street a little bit, so
True.
that you're not messing with the
Perhaps, yeah.
construction and the, you know, sidewalk guys and everything.
yeah. Anything further from the board? Seeing and hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward,
move to approve the solicitor's permit for the Women's Auxiliary American Legion Post 193 for the annual poppy flower sale to be held during the month of May at the flower shop in town, the thrift shop, and Cumberland Farms, as presented this evening.
Second.
thank you. Made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 And the chair votes aye. And last, we have a special one-day liquor licenses request from Bullspit Wine and Malt for a May Fest. How are you tonight, gentlemen? So we are looking at 5 special one-day licenses, May 13th, 18th, 19th, 20th, and 21st. So what have you got planned for the weekend? For that,
Yeah, the first event would be our Mayfest. We, just,
I'm sorry, a little bit closer to the mic.
it would be the Mayfest, our first event going on, trying to bring people to the site and get them to see what we've been up to. Just a little bit for the kids going on. We do have some music, and hopefully we'll have our food truck in order by then, too.
And that would be on the Saturday, the 13th,
Yep.
okay?
Yes. Yep.
And then 18th through the 21st, basically the same stuff?
Yeah, just a little less, more trying to get into a regular schedule, which we try to be open once everything is complete.
Okay. I'll open it up to the board. Questions or comments?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Anderson?
so you're planning on being open on the 13th from 11 to 10 o'clock? 11 a.m. till 10 o'clock at night
Yes.
for your Mayfest? Because that looks like the most fun.
Yeah, Saturdays may look like that, depending on, of course, weather and things like that.
And you're going to have music that whole time?
Sorry.
Music the whole time?
There'll be periods of that, yes. For Mayfest, 5 o'clock. Yeah, at 5 o'clock, the band will go on, and then we don't have anything
So
before
you'll
that.
probably have bands later on in the day. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the plan. It's been a challenge with bookings and things, but, yeah.
Are you going to have like I don't know, DJ or records or something earlier?
We do have the sound system but it doesn't really carry, so.
No, that wasn't my concern. I'm more concerned about making sure people know it's going to be fun all day.
We try to get that point across usually, but.
Anything else from the Board of Selectmen?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mrs. Lapointe.
I think it's a great idea, and go for it. And you're certainly not obligated to, but if you wanted to advertise like, hey, go to the Taste of Winchendon and then head over to Bullspit for an after party.
That's definitely a
Yeah.
good tool, so. it's-
Madam Chair, is Mother's Day on the 14th this year?
Yes.
Just saying.
So the moms can go out and party on Saturday, and dads take care of everybody on Sunday.
There we go.
I think it's a win.
Anything further? Yes, Mrs. Solzback.
Madam Chair, if I could just add, that part of the reason also that these gentlemen are going through another special one-day license process is they're still waiting for the official final word from the state. So once they're licensed through the state, they're not gonna have to come back anymore for these one-off items. But I do just wanna thank Keith and Jim for coming out one more extra night just to make sure we do it by the book and go through the process. But moving forward, it should be, just like any other business.
Any time frame as to when that's going to get settled? Not that I don't mind seeing your handsome
That's
faces.
not a loaded
Kinda like it.
question.
I've been in regular contact with the ABCC, and they update me whenever there's any movement on the licensure, and we're probably maybe 2 weeks out from that, so
Okay.
hence the timeframe you see up there.
All right,
Yeah.
perfect.
Thanks for your patience.
Yes. Anything further from the board? Seeing and hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward,
I move to approve the special one-day liquor licenses for wine malt by Bullspit Brewery for their Mayfest dates of May 13th, 18th, 19th, 20th, and 21st, as presented this evening.
Second.
made and seconded, all in favor say aye,
Aye.
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Next up, under updates, Mr. Solzback, I'll turn this over to you for an ARPA balance update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we've committed in previous meetings and stuck with it to provide periodic updates on our ARPA funds and the balance for ARPA, especially more recently with the water pipe project, getting the green light from the state. We thought it might be good to circle back and get a good idea for how much resources are there. So we had held back $500,000, and we still have that $500,000 withheld and carved out for the water pipe. There's a couple other projects that are outstanding. They're all on target or a little bit under for the most part. And so when you take into consideration what we spent to date plus that $500,000, it's going to leave a remainder of roughly $250,000 as a little bit of a safety net. I want to thank Mr. Croto because he's done a real good job of updating the ARPA sheet as we moved through this process. So there is an additional item, and Brian, I don't know if you want to come up to the mic, that was added that we wanted to bounce off the group. So I guess starting third from the bottom, fourth from the bottom. So that $100,000 is the 20% match that were required when we received that $500,000 special community project from Lori Trahan's office on North Central Street. So that $100,000 is our match. The next one down, the asset management for stormwater, that is one of your warrant articles upcoming for annual town meeting, the $39,000 figure. Central Street plantings is something that we had talked about maybe 6 months ago, and that the possibility of the state picking up the cost of those plantings, it looks like it's leaning towards they're not. And Brian can add to that a little bit too, but we're looking for a way to do it in-house. Brian did go out and put the work in and got quotes from some landscapers, and the numbers were just astronomical. And so he and I talked about it a little bit and figured we could probably put something together that would look just as good and be resilient, but not needlessly eat up funds. And then the Front Street Bridge repair design for $40,000, and I'll let Brian talk about that a little bit more.
So currently, we have a hole in the bridge. The bridge is down to one lane now on Front Street that connects to High Street. We need to figure out what the repair is going to be, and we don't budget for this, so if we don't fund it in this respect, the bridge is going to continue to stay one lane. I'm not saying that the $40,000 is going to fix it, because I don't anticipate that, but then it allows us to understand what we have to get into to do the repair for the bridge. So it's for them to come out, do a full assessment of the bridge, tell us what's wrong and what we need to do to fix it, so that we can move forward with a biddable set of documents to have a cost to come back, because we don't really want to take that bridge out of commission like we have in previous years. So I feel like this is a step in the correct direction, because it's not just providing a report, it's providing providing a document that's gonna be biddable and allow us to see what repairs need to be made to figure out, so we can figure out as a town how we're gonna go about funding that.
All right, thank you. Questions, comments, Mrs. Anderson?
Madam Chair, and could the repair of that be taken out of the $1 million that is going to be, we hope will be approved at town meeting? The paving money?
That's a decision that could be made. With the condition of the roads, I wouldn't recommend that. The conditions of the roads at this point are pretty bad, and that money is drastically needed for road paving. You're able to use Chapter 90 funds for the repairs of bridges, but again, we don't carry a large balance. We've been pretty diligent about spending the Chapter 90 funds so we can get the roads paved, because that's about 80% of the requests that come into my office on a daily basis is road conditions.
If I could add a little bit of that
Yes.
as well in terms of strategy, because Barbara, I do get your point on that. You have a much better shot at securing grant funds or an earmark to replace that bridge than you would to pave roads in general. So, you're taking on a little bit of a risk, but it would be my recommendation to go ahead and pave the road, because you're not going to get grant money to pave your roads ever, and they're very, very far behind. But you have a good shot if we work with our State House delegation or Congress to try to secure funds to.
Well, I think that was going to be what I was going to go to next, is have we looked into the infrastructure funds that's available? And I'm thinking it should qualify, because having that bridge down, even at one lane, and I understand there isn't much that you can do about that, but it's just terrible, there's no real clear way to mark that, and I would just rather see that bridge up and running.
So the one grant that you're thinking of is a small bridge grant, and that bridge is too big for that. This bridge is kind of difficult because it's not huge, but it's not small. So it doesn't, excuse me, it doesn't classify for the small bridge grant, because the small bridge grant only does bridges 10 feet or less, and obviously that bridge is a lot larger than 10 feet. So it would take some working with our delegation to try to get funding out of MassDOT for it.
Well, worth rattling some bushes as much as we can to see what might possibly.
Right, I didn't want to go rattling any bushes till we figure out what the cost and extent is, because if we know what the cost is and extent, then we know what we're going to try to get.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay. Any other questions, comments?
And so I would just add, if these expenditures are agreeable, then that's going to bring the total balance down to a little over 160.
Okay.
And you have until the end of next summer to spend those funds. So I'm sure you won't struggle to find a way to, but just a reminder.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward?
just a quick question. Will you be sending these to the Finance Committee?
Yes, of course.
Because they'll need it for tomorrow night's meeting. Okay, thanks.
All right, well, thank you very much for that report.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a discussion, Destination Winchendon. Rick and I attended last Tuesday. Dr. Samuels was here from the Education Alliance, Stonegate, with information about a proposal he has put together, as he references, as Mr. Sosbach references in his letter. The word destination is referenced in our master plan, like 38 times or some such. So we wanted to bring this before the board for discussion, and also to look at the engagement letter that Stonegate Alliance presented us, and if and how we want to move forward. Mr. Sosbach, do you want to make any comments?
I think you hit the nail on the head. One piece that we've been stressing a lot over the past years, trying to have some type of targeted approach to placemaking in town, just due to the need for growth. Looking at the trends, looking at the way that expenses, basic town expenses are skyrocketing, and the need to drive more growth for revenue to keep up with that. And I think one important piece of this conversation we've been having is identifying specific parcels in town, and partnering with the owners of those privately held parcels in a way that in the long term will benefit the town by trying to secure private investment. And I think for a long time in town, it seems like we didn't have a very direct, targeted strategy to deal with those properties. There's been a few that I've picked off since I've been in town, but I think investing in this type of initiative is probably a good way to keep the town on track and keep the town locked in on those specific parcels. So there are 3 that are identified specifically. Just scroll down real quick. So if you're looking at this map, you have downtown, obviously, so there's the large green building right off Front Street, tucked in the woods down the hill there. Winchendon Springs is number 2, that's the White's Mills, and then number 3 is the whole Waterville, it's specifically the Waterville Plaza, but that whole little area and intersection down that way, there's high potential for growth, just given the traffic counts that you have coming down 202. So one of the biggest takeaways, I think, for this is that you would have a firm that would get the community together to have, facilitate those conversations and help the town kind of control the fate of some of these properties, so that when something does take off and there is some type of investment made, it's made in an image that's reflective of feedback provided by the citizens, instead of just rolling the dice and having a private developer come in and just kind of hammer in whatever they want on those specific parcels. I have nothing else to add beyond that, except what they're proposing at this time is just an early level look at this process, and they did kind of highlight, sorry, I'm just going to pull up the page, in their engagement letter, specific deliverables, and that's something that Chairwoman Labrie and I had really stressed, is that we wanted to see specific reports. So I actually did meet with a member of, with Dr. Samuels and a member of his team over the weekend to look at some that they'd done, Methuen and a couple other communities, where they targeted specific under-leveraged sites in those communities, and ushered them through the development phase, and were able to successfully secure private developers to invest in those communities. So I think this might be something worthwhile for the board to explore.
Justin, could you pull up the letter of engagement references the scope of engagement, scope of services. There's a separate document. Was it part of that? Okay, hold up. Okay, possible uses. No, go a little bit, okay, go down. Stop. Okay. Go to the next one. And then one more, and that should be scope of services. So this is, the engagement letter references scope of services. And this is what that would cover. Orientation information sessions, environmental scan, research analysis of market conditions. And just to clarify, we do realize, of course, that the Winchendon Springs, the White's Mill, is privately owned. It is for sale. I believe Mr. Sulzbeck has had some discussions with a representative of the owners, so they're aware of that. Field interviews, research identify economic development, planning, and project-related grant possibilities. Research and prepare phase 1 report. All up to questions and comments.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mrs. Anderson.
isn't the green building also privately owned?
It is.
I think what I have a hard time is expending town funds on looking into properties that are privately owned, I'm not sure I'm comfortable doing that. I can understand why he's looking at them, but while they're privately owned, I don't think it's our business to be doing that. And I think you could be stepping into a can of worms.
So there's always a push and pull on that type of dynamic. And I think it's, what you're trying to combat is the appearance that if there's people that have privately held properties, then the perception of the general public is typically, well, good for you, then pony up the money and figure it out and find a way to make it work. But I think in Winchendon, from an economic development standpoint, things are a little bit more unique than a typical market, because you pretty much need the expertise to go out and specifically target and secure private investment to come into town. So if it's a matter of a public-private partnership and you're looking at something a little more traditional, like a TIF, for example, where you're waiving taxes to try to help development get off the ground, I would say this type of investment is pretty comparable to that, but it's less of a commitment, and that what you're getting from going through this process and putting up public dollars to try to incubate something at those sites is job creation and further growth and future tax revenue down the road. So even if you're investing some money up front, it'll pay for itself in dividends if you get something up and running on even one of those sites. But if the alternative is having them sit privately owned and doing nothing for another 10 years, if you look at the amount of lost potential revenue from just letting them sit, those are the angles that you need to weigh. But I do understand, Barbara, the discomfort at first glance in that, but it's pretty typical for a municipality to make that type of investment.
I think, I'm sorry, go ahead, Leanne.
Well, I think what it seems like is the town of Winchendon is acting almost like the agent or a broker for private individuals who can then say, well, look, they're interested in my property, I'm going to jack the price of that property up.
I don't really understand that sentiment.
Well, if we're going to be looking and selling and promoting developers to come in and make use of these privately owned properties, are we not, in fact, increasing the value of these properties that are pretty dilapidated as they are?
In some capacity, but I mean, that's kind of how it works. That's how economic development works.
Well, then explain it to me.
So, I mean, I can give you a good example from my home city at the present moment. So like the Hamilton Canal Innovation District on a much larger scale in the city of Lowell, who also has no shortage of deficient and underutilized properties. But making a public effort, working with their planning office and the economic development office to try to package these parcels or neighborhoods or areas in such a way that will encourage economic growth. And I think that's a lot of the issues that we see in Winchendon is there is no plan. There's literally no plan. We just kind of hope that somebody throws a dart at the map and it lands on Winchendon, or they just show up. And that doesn't really work. And so what you want to try to do is sit down and have these types of conversations. I think the important piece also to note is this is on a very early high level, and as you move down that road, and if you're looking at having these types of conversations, it means bringing in the private ownership and letting them know that the town is trying to get a plan together for their specific parcel. You wouldn't go out and do it if it was a small lot, or even something like the RHI building, I would say. Is kind of at the limit of where you would bother doing it because the return's not enough. But if you're looking at something like down the hill out this window over there, that could be effectively its own little campus, given the size and scale of it. So if you can get something in there that could create potentially hundreds of jobs in within walking distance of Central Street, in a community where transportation is oftentimes an issue, there's a public benefit to helping get that off the ground. But, you know, like I said, I understand your reservation. I understand the appearance of some folks would just say, well, if you have the money to own that giant piece of property, then you should figure it out yourself. But I think for a lot of these parcels, the reason they sit like that is because they don't have the resources or the know-how to do it.
And I think also, Justin and I have met with Dr. Samuels and some of his team multiple times over the last few months, and the question they posed to us were, you know, give us a couple areas in town. So these were the first one that came to mind. From the discussions I've had, when I think of the goal of this destination Winchendon, it is, you know, not just to fix this, you know, make this currently privately owned something into boutique stores and cafes and, you know, a little bit maybe upscale apartments or whatever, or this private one owned, but it's the town as a whole, I think. There are lots of places in town. We look at the empty storefronts on Central Street. We look at the assets that we have, the bike trail, the waterways, the theater. And I relate this to kind of what Mr. Crota was just saying about the Front Street Bridge. You've got to spend a little bit of money to get a plan in place. And even if we don't take that plan any further right this second, we've had the master plan for a while, it could give us a jumping off point, or I believe it will give us a jumping off point for improving the town. As Justin said, financially, you can only cut so far. We need to think out of the box and how we're going to grow the revenue. And we felt that, you know, I feel that this would be a good investment to get that plan and maybe get it off the ground.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward?
Yeah, I mean, normally, when I hear about a study and spending money on a study, I get a little leery of that because so many studies end up on the shelf, gathering dust. But this one is such a natural tie-in to the master plan that we have in town. And that master plan, at least from what I'm hearing, everyone's referring to that. That is a living document. And this one looks at that economic development, but it also looks at what forests, what lakes, what rivers, all these other things that we can, you know, capitalize on that we're not doing a great job right now. And like the chair said, we may not use it for another 6 months, a year, but at least we have the plan. We know which direction to go in. And yeah, it's $18,000 for this study. We've spent a lot more for other studies that we never used, and I think this one's going to be used. Maybe not the first year, but tied in with the master plan, it gives us a good plan for the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mrs. Lapointe?
I agree that I think it can be used to our benefit, and not to sound cynical, but as long as we get the right person in the seat. I have some reservations. And I think it's a good idea, but I have some reservations. I don't want to spend the money and have it just sit. But I do have a question, and it might just be that I'm tired. But in my thing is abbreviated, in 7.1, I think it's an engagement letter, perhaps, from Stonegate, dated April 5th. In our capacity as advisors, Stonegate shall serve at the pleasure of Winchendon on a month-to-month basis for a 45-day period. I'm not understanding that. What is that? I'm sorry.
So there's effectively a larger scale, I guess, approach to this is the best way to look at it. And so what I had expressed to them was, I don't really know if there's an appetite to make that big of a bite, but if you can break it apart in such a way where, and this is probably where the month-by-month language comes in, if you can break it into steps, or in this instance, phases, so if the town can go through the first phase, they have a finished product, a workable document, And if they find that useful and helpful and they want to keep the ball rolling, they can keep you on as a consultant. If we get to the end of that and they say, hey, this was helpful, but I think this is all we really need, you can walk away and you don't need to continue going down that path. But I just wanted to give the board and the community the flexibility to kind of take this, these consultant services à la carte, I guess, in some way, just to give you some flexibility.
So like the 45-day period is like a kind of initial phase one, and then we have the option to go forward? Is that what that's trying to relay?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I was just trying to understand.
No, that's
and I
fine,
wasn't-
because, yeah, these have gone through multiple variations since late March, early April.
Yeah,
And initially, Dr. Samuel's proposal was for, I think, like a 6-month agreement or something like that. And as Justin said, too big a bite. Let's bring it down and see what we can do in smaller bites. And I will also mention that Dr. Samuels is working with the school department in town. In fact, I think he started working with the superintendent before he started working with the town, talking about how to bring, early college education into the town, into the area, sort of things like that. The last time I was at Dr. Samuel's house in Natick, I met the dean of Cambridge College, was there, and he lives in Concord, and he sat in on our meeting, and he was into it. This was the document we were going through, and he said, I said, I'm going to take a run out there. So I said, let me know when you're coming, and we'll give you a tour.
I did
So
plan to
it's
be
like
there
kind of
last
like
week.
a
I
double-
apologize that I missed it.
Oh, that's fine.
My schedule blew up, but.
So, from the town side, from the public school side, we've got the Winchendon School as well. So we're looking at not just, Destination Winchendon, but also how can we make it an education center as well? So,
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward?
Yeah, and following along with that, you can see, I guess, in the report, there's several towns where they presented this. There are many destination towns now in Massachusetts. And I think a few of those towns, if I read it correctly on research, a few of those towns didn't go much further than phase one. But what they did was they had the outline, they had the big picture, and they formed their own town destination committees to work with that. So they didn't want to put money further down the road, but they had the plan, and they took that and said, we're going to develop our own committee now that we have this basic plan to work with. Sort of like having the master plan, and then having the committees to go and make sure the master plan is implemented.
Yeah, I would see, should this move forward, if this moves forward, we form a committee of some sort to work with Dr. Samuels and to work through this phase one. Get the community involved right from the start.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And as far as the compensation of the 18,000, Mr. Saltzback, what were your thoughts as far as covering that?
So the other benefit in doing it in pieces was that the smaller piece up front of 18,000, you could get going now, because you have the resources to do that, either the 30 or 25,000 that we had set aside in the budget for community development purposes for consulting. You could tap into that. You could tap into ARPA funds. It's an expense that you could pick up now kind of unilaterally. And then once you have that deliverable and you have a report and a committee has met and discussed it, if they want to take that next step, the timing would be right to bring it to a special town meeting, for example, where you could open it up to a larger body and ask the community, hey, do you want to continue investing in this? And I think the most important takeaway ultimately is that it's, what we're talking about is, how to market this community and the resources it has, and I think that this would do that.
Thank you. Anything else from the board? If no other questions?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mrs.
Can I just
Anderson.
remind you that one of these properties, this town has already invested in 2015, and given extensive help and resources. I think the town is going to resent that. I would have felt better had we not chosen private property.
Could I add to that?
Yes.
Sorry, the three that are up there are by example only. So if you sit down and you get this committee together, like a Destination Winchendon committee, they're the ones, I think, ultimately that would be and should be picking whatever sites the town should target, and they would be bringing it back to this body for approval. I just put that one up there because it's one of the more obvious ones. I know that it's got a little bit of a murky history, but that aside, you can't just let it sit there any longer. 'Cause it's only going to get worse and it won't get developed. So you have to find some way to work with those people. But it's just to stress, the three that are up there, example only.
Right, yes. And,
No, I'm done.
okay. If there's
Ms.
any,
Lapointe would like to
I
speak.
just have a question.
I'm-
So,
yeah,
you say that the
Sandra.
3 properties referred there are just for example only. So then, what do we get for $18,000? I'm confused.
Yeah, no, that's fine, and I can try to narrow it down a little better. I apologize, by the way, the pollen is killing me today. So those are just like the low-hanging fruit. If we're just sitting down in a small group and saying, like, what are 3 really underutilized, under-leveraged areas in town? I think those are probably the top 3. But you're not paying someone to go out and just put stars on a map. I already did it. What you're paying them for is to go through the process of having that public process of running a committee, of putting together a report so that when you do identify those parcels, and it could be 5, 6, or 7 different areas in town, they're effectively putting together a prospectus on each of those individual parcels and laying down the acreage, the zoning, like breaking it down into a digestible piece so that when they're going around and shopping it around for investors, you're really able to spoon feed private investment, these different opportunities in town, rather than hoping that somebody is going to go digging for it, because it's one of the hardest parts of this town. It has so much going for it, and I think a lot of people see all of those pieces. You have a state park, you have so many different bodies of water, you have the new amphitheater, you rebuilt all your infrastructure downtown over the past few years. But it's a matter of finding a firm that can put it together and package it and market it in such a way that you're getting the right person to come in and develop that property that's going to work with the town, rather than just kind of, in so many words, shove it down the town's throat. And so that's the takeaway you're getting. That's the deliverable, is a report highlighting those under-leveraged parcels in town, breaking it down, really straightforward, really easy, doing some of the preliminary legwork to really help entice private dollars to come make an investment in Winchendon.
Do they market that?
Yeah. So that would be part of this process.
Okay.
yes, Mr. Croto. Amy, did you have anything else?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you.
So one thing in this state is hundreds of millions of dollars are allocated for projects like this. It's through the One Stop program.
I'm
and
sorry, the what program?
The One Stop, which is,
One Stop, okay.
yeah, which is multiple grants, and they set aside hundreds of millions of dollars for private industry, just like this. So you can take buildings like the one that's located out here. You could bring power, you could bring water, you can bring sewer, but they also now fund the rehab of the insides so that it stimulates the economy. So it's not like Winchendon would be the first one to ever do something like this, that the state's physically paying millions of dollars a year to get places like this going.
Thank you, Brian, that's a good point. So the other piece of it as well is not only just private investment, but knowing the different grant programs in and out. So if it's a matter of resources, if that's the obstacle, trying to get a particular parcel off the ground, which money is typically the issue, these services would help in a consulting capacity, in the same way that we pay a consultant for CDBG, for example. This consultant would help try to identify MassWorks grants or other type of grants that would link up in a public-private partnership, where it would say give $1 million towards town infrastructure and $1 million towards one of these private parcels to help them get off the ground and kind of smooth things over a little bit. That's another kind of big win in this agreement too.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mrs. Lapointe.
So part of the services offered by this company would be potential funding resources, rather than us doing the legwork to try to figure that out. It's something that they would assist us with.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's outlined in the scope of services.
I'm sorry, I'm sure it is.
No,
I-
that's
I-
fine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Couple questions. Jane Lapointe. What you're looking at, is that going to be available on the town website for people to look at?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, that's one thing. And the other, as I'm listening to it, it sounds like it would add a lot to the town. I'm speaking as someone who was involved in putting the master plan together, so I'm aware of the details of that. I'm also involved in some other regional projects, so I have heard about what you just said. As a matter of fact, we had a review of it today. It's an amazing program, source of funding, what it can do, and I think Winchington is a good community for that. And the other thing that will start to come out, probably at the Taste of Winchington, is that as part of the Heal Winchington and Community Heart and Soul project that got started a long time ago, we have conducted a number of sort of story gathering and information gathering sessions with people. And I don't remember the exact number of data points we have, a few hundred, about what people like about Winchington, what they want to see, their hopes, what matters to them. And town infrastructure was a very, I'm giving you a little preview, was one of the very big themes of that. There are 5 themes, town infrastructure was one, and there was a lot of talk about what could be done to bring, businesses into town, to bring employment opportunities into town and all that. So what I'm hearing here tonight is resonating with what I've heard people in this town say they want. And part of what we're going to be doing with Heal and Heart and Soul at Taste of Winchington, the Solstice and that, is using those opportunities to try to get more input from people. Did we get this right? Here's what we've heard. But I just want to let you know that, there's that kind of feedback out there.
Thank you. Anything further from the board or audience member? Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward?
I will move to authorize the town manager to enter into an agreement with Stonegate Alliance to conduct a destination Winchton study as proposed for the fees described above.
Second.
Thank you. Made and seconded. Any further discussion? Is that a hand up to say yes? No. Okay. Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Chair votes aye.
I will vote no,
No?
only because the way it was presented is incredibly dangerous.
Thank you. Okay. As far as forming a committee to work with Dr. Samuels and his group moving forward.
We
do
can
that?
put an advertisement out and maybe bring a group of people back at your next meeting, or maybe the one after annual town meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
On that topic, when you put that request out, are there certain skills or background or experience you're going to be looking for? Because when I hear this, I think there are certain probably boards, committees, and towns that have an overlapping charge with this, and part of our master plan was to try to figure out how to get committees to maybe update some of their thinking. So it's like, who would be responsible? And beyond that, a mix of citizens. So I'm just curious, is it like, hey, we've got this thing going, or do people have to look into this and speak to what they add to this? I don't know how it's done.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So, I mean, it would be helpful if there are people that had some crossover experience with like the master plan committee or the master plan implementation committee, or a background in community development.
Economic development. This stuff, yeah.
So I think it would be good to get some of those, but then also a mix of just general town folk.
Yes.
Is also helpful as well.
No, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was asking.
Mhm.
Yeah, and some of the other use possibilities were, later life residential. One of the times we were discussing place, our elderly housing in town is critical. So, it's everything from, retail to
Yeah.
a little more upscale housing to taking care of our seniors and stuff like
Well,
that.
multi-use properties
Yes.
could be of interest, because again, in the Heart and Soul surveys, more places to live, more apartments, things like that, mixed use. So, okay, thank you. This sounds
Thank
good.
you. All right, moving forward, Colonial Power Group, review of energy aggregation. Mr. Salzback, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I included in your packet just a reminder that the energy aggregation we had entered into was a year-long agreement to try to buy time to let the energy market stabilize. So believe it or not, where it's only May, December is right around the corner. And so it looks like things have stabilized a little bit. If you recall, around this time last year, gas prices at the pump in particular were just absolutely skyrocketing. But the picture is still not super great. And so it would be my recommendation to get some, ask Colonial Power Group to pull some figures to see if maybe you can put another year extension in place to feel things out. You don't want to do anything longer because like eventually things should come down back to earth a little bit. But I think it'd be, waiting until you're right up against it in December, trying to keep in mind the timing of trying to fill this seat. I think it's just one more thing that's going to be on that person's list, that if we take care of it now, you're not going to have to take care of it later. So if that makes sense to the board, I'm just going to ask Colonial to put something together, and they'll bring indicative pricing forward in advance of your May 22nd Board of Selectmen meeting.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see what the market's been doing and
Madam Chair?
get a picture of it. Yes,
There's been
Mrs.
a number of
Anderson.
conversations on Facebook, and I've had a number of residents text me and let me know there are several suppliers with much lower rates. And so I would suggest it would be in their best interest to reevaluate that.
Okay.
And I think the takeaway there, just a reminder for folks at home too, is that when we entered into it, it was significantly lower than what National Grid was. Since then, some time has passed, and National Grid, I think, actually is a couple cents underneath where that agreement is that we had entered into.
National Grid is Clearview.
Yeah, so,
There are several. Okay.
they have a tendency to fluctuate. If they, to date, if they had moved over to us when we implemented it last December, they'd still be seeing a savings, even with National Grid being a little higher right now. But I think it would not be advisable to let it kind of run its course and then try to do something later. If the numbers come back and they're not great, then you can still wait. So, say wait a month, pull them in a month, and look at them again. But if they're more competitive and there's a chance to save people money, there's no harm in doing it.
Yeah, then we can see what else out there.
Madam Chair.
Okay. Mrs. Lapointe?
Along that lines, National Grid has told a number of residents, including my own household, that they are actually going to be coming down about 35% in their rates in the next couple months. I find it a little hard to believe that the representative would say that if it were not true, but just given that, I would make sure, I'm not a National Grid fan, anybody other than them is good in my book, but I would make sure that whatever quote or rate or whatever we get potentially coincides with that information.
Yeah, right now, they're really not competitive. And
Okay. Yeah, one second. Well, you don't,
yeah,
okay.
If I understand it correctly, National Grid always lowers their rates in the summer, and they went to the, whatever that board is in Boston that sets rates, Public Utilities Commission. And so they may go down for the summer, but they're going to go back up in the winter. They've always cycled through it that way. So be mindful of that. And they probably took a hit, and so they lowered it, but it's going to go back up again.
Very
So
good point.
just be mindful.
Yeah, seasonal. All set on that?
Yep, no action needed.
All right, thank you very much. One item on the old business, 8.1, review the Winchendon water line documents. Mr. Salzback, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there's two pairs of documents here, and I'll run through real quick what they are. So the first one, titled Sherbert Road Authority to File. So that document would authorize my office to file the applications and execute the agreements. And I have language here for the grant and/or loan assistance. So basically what it's doing is
Sorry, a little slower.
the grant
Thank you.
and/or loan assistance. So what you're doing is just authorizing me to enter and effectively accept that grant we received, the $2 million forgiveness. The document paired with that just certifies that vote. And then the second set is the same exact thing on a much smaller scale, the stormwater authority to file. So that article coming up on the annual town meeting, once again, you're just authorizing my office to effectively accept that grant. And then secondarily, the other document to certify that you took that vote. And so the recommended motion is a little different than what you would typically see because we're covering two items at once.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the board? Seeing and hearing none?
No, I'm just thinking.
Okay.
I'm
Understand.
not sure what these motions do exactly. Because, I understand the critical nature of maintaining that $2 million, but this is a $10 million project. So where are we getting the other $8 million? And what are we exactly allowing you to do? Does that make sense?
No, it does. So we're going to be bringing forward a plan outlining realistically what that remaining expense is. And so I'd say that there's a threefold approach there. So one is trying to narrow down what the actual project cost is going to be, because we've been saying $9.5 million, but we want to try to get it down a little bit if we can tighten up the scope. So that's the first piece. The other piece is what other resources could have we pulled in. So we know with confidence that we'll have $500,000 in ARPA. We know with confidence that we're going to receive a little under $2 million now from the state in forgiveness. And we do have a couple other applications out there to hopefully help cover the remainder. But I think the important piece to highlight, and maybe we can break this down at the next meeting on a spreadsheet, is if you recall at the town meeting, when the town voted for us to authorize us to go into this process, there was a handout with like a green scenario, a yellow scenario, and a red scenario. And then the way I broke it down at the time was that if we can get the yellow scenario, we can move forward. Financially, we can find a way to make that work. If we get green, then that's great. It would just be way easier. But if it's red, then realistically, financially, the town can't afford to move forward. With the numbers that I just listed, we're firmly in that yellow section. So I think the question, Mrs. Anderson, that you're asking is realistically, what's the plan to break down that remainder? And I believe in that town meeting as well, some folks had asked the question, well, is the town going to pick that up or are the ratepayers going to pick it up? And I think I responded something to the effect of, well, that's a debate to be had later. Now is later, I think, in terms of how that breakdown is, whether it's 50-50 between ratepayers in the town or a 70-30 split. It kind of really depends on individual, I guess, appetites on the board. But the other factor, too, is now with the water department that you're starting to build up some retained earnings, are we able to calculate out and see if even a portion of that can be covered by retained earnings? So then when you're increasing the rate, maybe you're not increasing it by 6%, you're increasing it by 5%, because your retained earnings have been projecting out well enough to kind of cover you a little bit and absorb some of that blow. And then on the town side, the question is, how much is dropping off in the debt schedule? And how much do you realistically want to pick up? So if you want to try to maintain a middle ground between those peaks and valleys on your debt service line on the annual budget, you could backfill that whole section with water pipe costs, with the understanding that when you go to do your capital plan next winter, you're going to have no money to borrow. So you need to be mindful of that any of your expenses there would have to be grants, free cash, whatever's left of ARPA. There's a little bit of a line to walk there. So, I apologize, it's a very long answer, but it's kind of a complex topic. So the most important piece, though, is if we don't get this authority to file in, you're losing that $2 million. So that's the bottom line statement and the most important one. And then I would say as a follow-up, it would be appropriate, I think, for me and the team to come back at the next meeting and maybe give you 2 or 3 different breakdowns of how to tackle that remainder. Once again, with the understanding that there may be another grant rolling through in the next 6 to 8 months that might take another little nibble out of that number for you, but no guarantees.
Okay.
So the bottom line is, we don't know what we're granting you permission to do, because you're still looking, correct?
No.
No.
No. So,
Sorry.
no, you go ahead.
My understanding is what we're looking for tonight is authorizing the town manager to enter into the agreements for the 2 million.
But
And
to
the
look for
stormwater
grants and/or
abatement.
loan assistance, as well as furnishing such information, data, and documents. So that's why I'm asking specifically, what are we, like, there's that 8 million left over. We'll call it, because it's easy numbers. In your explanation, you were talking about, well, there's a grant out there that I can still try for, or there's loans, but you're still looking. You didn't have a final, this is
Yeah,
what I'm going for.
I understand what you're saying. So we're not still looking. So what I would say is, or what I'm trying to stress is, if you move forward now financially, you can afford it. can afford it. You are in good shape. If a grant comes through, you're in even better shape. If an additional grant comes through, I should say. Does that make more sense? So if you had to go, if you went and.
I want to know specifically, what is this doing, and where are you going with it?
So if you pulled the trigger on this today, the town has the borrowing capacity to cover this cost in its entirety.
The 8 plus 2, or
Over,
just the 2?
No, the
This
two-
is addressing
two's
just
a
the 2?
grant. Right.
so.
Are these
so the-
motions addressing just the 2 or the 10?
So what this authority to file is, it's saying that the town is committing that it has the resources available, and as such, will gratefully accept that $2 million from the state.
But he's saying that we have the 8, or we can get it.
That we have the capacity to borrow the 8.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
So the
So-
motions indirectly address the 10, not just the 2.
Yes. So, so it involves, it's committing to the entire project cost, but the reason you're doing this is to get the $2 million. That makes it easier.
It would make it easier if I knew what I was doing with the 8. I understand, I'm very clear on the 2,
Right.
and,
Well, let me work backwards. So if we said it was a $9.5 million pipe, and if we can work with the engineers and let's say get it down to $9 million.
I like the even numbers.
So we'll say $9 million, and then the state has forgiven $2 million, so now you're down to $7 million, and we have $500,000 from ARPA, now you're down to $6.5 million. So the question is there enough debt capacity to cover $6.5 million over the next 20 years? And the answer is yes. So that's a $6.5 million expense that you can cover over that time span, with the understanding, like we had committed at town meeting, that, let's say it's 50-50, which I'm not necessarily sure it should be that, but just for the sake of easy numbers, with the understanding that half that is going to be covered up, or is going to be covered by the town. So now what you're saying is you're covering $3 million from the annual operating budget and debt service over the next 20 years, which you can do very comfortably. And that the other $3 million you're going to have to make up for either by paying that debt out of existing retained earnings in water, which you're not going to be able to cover the full amount, or by raising the water rate, which I would stress is something that I get it. No one likes raising water rates. I don't want to go down, open that can of worms again. We all get it. But we had stated pretty openly and clearly on town meeting floor that was going to have to be a piece of this puzzle. And what it's looking like is, if you're going on that 50-50, $3 million of it is going to have to come out of the water enterprise, which isn't, given the 9.5 million total number we were starting with, isn't terribly bad. But what I'm also stressing is that it's going to take about probably 2 years to get the shovel in the ground on this, really, a year or two.
So it'd go out to bid late summer with a early spring start.
So not only is it a matter of waiting for the next 6 or 8 months or so to see if applications we currently have out come in to make that number even better, you can still actively apply. If something pops up next month, the month after, next year, you can still keep trying to pull money in and drag that number down and make it an even easier swallow. But right now, 3 million for the town and 3 million for the water enterprise is something that comfortably you can absorb.
I'm not comfortable with it. So I would strongly urge you to continue looking for grants as much as possible. I know it needs to be done, and I know it needs to be replaced, but I think it's kind of a terrible situation, and I wish I had more firm data in front of me to know exactly what I'm looking at.
Sure, and I would also stress that 3 million number, just for easy numbers, it's not your typical borrowing, so that the interest rate is really low because we got that award from the state. Not only are they funding 2 million, but they're also giving us access to a really low interest loan, 2-point-something%.
It's 2 even.
Is it 2 even?
Yeah,
And so that's another component where it's even less riskier to be borrowing that amount because it's such a low interest rate that you're not gonna typically get in the open market.
Okay.
that was my big piece is that if we went to the open market, we're paying 4.5%. We're locking in at 2%. And the amount of work that went in for the town of Winchendon to fight to get on this list, it's not an easy list. We're very, very fortunate not to have PFAS, but all the money for SRF is going to PFAS. So for Winchendon.
I'm sorry, what acronym are you saying?
PFAS, it's in the water. A lot of cities and
Okay.
towns are millions and millions of dollars in debt because of it. We don't have it in our water, so we're extremely lucky because of that. But this project, every one of us knows we need to do it because we need to secure our water. But the whole selling point for me to this is the locked-in 2%. That 2% doesn't change over 20 years. It's always 2%. Where if we went on a 20-year borrow from a traditional borrowing, it could change about 4.5%.
I'd like to just make myself super clear that I don't want to borrow anything at 2% or less if we don't have to.
If we don't have to, absolutely.
We need to find every alternative we can, like, hurt ourselves looking,
We've
because
applied.
it's in the best interest.
We've applied for every single grant that we can at this time out there for this, and we're gonna continue to apply for every single grant that is out there that we possibly can.
And just to give you a rough estimate of what it would cost, in terms of an annual payment, it would be about $165,000 on the town side and $165,000 on the water side if you did a 50-50 split, which I won't reiterate, I don't think is necessarily what the number should be, but it's not up to me.
Or less.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, it could be. So
At the
if another
most,
grant
right.
comes through, it could be even lower, but just to give people a ballpark idea, so it's not like we're saying, oh, annually, you guys are gonna have to come up with $1 million in
Right.
the town budget, like, no, it's, let's say 170,000 conservatively. That's pretty absorbable.
Okay. Anything further?
Does that need a motion, Madam Chair?
It does, it is
It
too.
does, yes.
Oh, right.
Do you want me to read it?
Yes.
I motion to authorize the town manager to file applications and execute agreements for grant and/or loan assistance, as well as furnishing such information, data, and documents pertaining to the applicant for a grant or grants and/or loans as may be required, and otherwise to act as the authorized representative of the applicant in connection with this application in relation to the Winchendon, Maine transmission line from Ashburnham.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
The chair will vote aye.
Madam Chair?
Mrs. Anderson,
I motion to authorize the town manager to file applications and execute agreements for the grant and/or loan assistance, as well as furnishing such information, data, and documents pertaining to the applicant for a grant, grants, and/or loans as may be required and otherwise to act as the authorized representative for the applicant in connection with this application in relation to the Winchendon Stormwater Asset Management Plan pending town meeting authorization.
Second.
Thank you. Made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you. Moving on, we have the town manager's report. Mr.
Thank you, Madam
Solzback, whenever
Chair.
you're ready.
On the financial side of things, the reporting for, federal reporting for ARPA has been complete, and thank you to Katie Medina and Mr. Croto for working together on that. For personnel, interviews for the part-time planning and development vacancy are scheduled for this week, so that role we're hoping to fill sometime within the next month. On the project update side of things, work continues on Central Street, and delays should be expected over the next 2 months. I saw there was a lot of raised castings out today, so just be careful when you're driving. The amphitheater at the Winchendon Community Park is nearing completion and is on target for the June 10th grand opening ceremony. The first meeting of the Fire Station Addition Working Group took place last week, and they're working on future timelines and will come before the Board of Selectmen periodically to provide updates on the progress of that project. And a dumpster you may have seen is in place at the two-family residence on Beach Street. That sale is nearing completion, and the folks that bought it are really eager to get going. So that was one of the biggest question marks, is if we went ahead and sold that, realistically, was there potential that that building would just sit and not get done? But it looks like they want to get right to it, get the siding off, and fix the roof.
Good.
And then I've been working with legal counsel to try to line up the appropriate paperwork for 4 Summer Drive. So we've been waiting pretty eagerly to start the remediation process for that project. Or excuse me, the outdoor remediation, so cleaning the soils and other things like that. As I think I had emailed to you recently, we received another $100,000 grant for mass development for that purpose to finish up. But we don't want to wait until that work is done to then sit down and say, okay, let's get the paperwork ready. Like, we want to have it ready to go for the first day to try to hand that off. A special thank you to our clerk's office and the poll workers for a smoothly run annual town election. Moderator Grout has met with me and sat down, and we've gone through the upcoming annual town meeting, so she's been briefed on that. And thank you to Coral for coming out and meeting with me for that purpose. As a reminder, annual town meeting is taking place on Monday, May 15th, 2023 at 7 p.m. at the high school. And then just a couple other last second notes. So there was some back and forth on the Board of Health elections. There was a tie for write-in. We are working with legal counsel to try to determine the best path forward on that. So when we find out, we'll communicate it to the board. There's a couple differing views on the best way to go about addressing that. I wanted to take a moment to echo some of the board members earlier in the meeting that you had actually missed, Amy, but thank you for your time serving, and congratulations on your last meeting. Your peers said some very nice things about you, so go back and
No, we
go back
didn't.
and watch
He's
the
lying.
meeting. Yeah, but Board of Selectmen, it's a tough role. It's really difficult. It's I don't need to tell all of you, but it's thankless work, and you volunteer a lot of time. And there's a lot of nights that you probably would have liked to had back, but you donated them for the service to your community, so thank you for doing that. And then also congratulations to Melissa Blanchard for coming in and filling that seat. Thank you to her for stepping up. I did reach out to Melissa. We had an early conversation, and we're really excited to get her on board. There was a communication earlier today I'd sent out from the clerk's office about the street listing books that I wanted to kind of bounce off of all of you real quick. So we haven't increased the cost of those for about 6 years. People actually still do use them.
A lot of people do.
Yeah.
But the cost to produce them has doubled in the past 6 years. So it was originally about $750, and I believe it's up to $14 and change now. So we're actively losing money on that. It shouldn't be a revenue driver, but we should at least be breaking even. So I did email all of you a proposal just to step it in over the next 2 years if you want to take a look at that. And if I don't hear, let's say in a week, If there's no complaints about that, then just let me know, and we'll go ahead and move forward on that.
Madam
Build-
Chair,
Build it in.
Mrs. Lapointe?
is that something that can be uploaded online as well? So people can just access it electronically as opposed to only hard copy?
So yes, so some people really like the hard copy. It, like, with every passing year, a little bit less so, in so many words. So we still maintain some hard copies, but it will be available online as well. So if people want that, you can just pull it up there.
Thank you.
I miss phone books.
I like paper too,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, yeah.
What can I say?
And then just a last piece, just to kind of echo the news, but I wanted to read it into the public record. Small town, everybody's known for some time now, but it's official that I am resigning from this role, but I wanted to take an opportunity publicly just to thank the community, thank my staff, and thank this board for taking a risk on me and taking a shot. And we got a lot done over the past 2 years. I really appreciate the opportunity to work with all of you. We got some things done that had sat for a really long time, and I think people were just too afraid to take it on. And I'm proud to be part of a group that took on some of those big ones and really kind of made things better for the people in Winchendon. So I appreciate the opportunity to work alongside all of you and our staff. And I'm fully committed over the next 60-plus days to trying to find a way to make that transition as smooth as possible, and anything I can do to help you get somebody in this seat. You know, when you work for a town, when you serve a community, eventually there comes a time where you walk away or move on to something new, but you still care about the town. It's always bittersweet, and so you have me in perpetuity. If you ever need me,
Thank you.
pick up the phone and call, and I'm always rooting for Winchendon, so thank you.
Thank you. Questions, comments on the town manager's report?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward?
couple things, I do this all the time. Will the electronic sign be up and running on Thursday, no later than Thursday for the town meeting? Okay, good. When will we be getting the motion booklets for the annual town meeting?
So I was speaking with legal counsel over the weekend on that, and I think we'll be able to get a draft out to you, let's say no later than Thursday morning, because I know you like to mark it up in advance
We
of the
need
meeting.
it before the meeting, yes,
Yep.
before the weekend.
Yep.
Okay.
And I would just like, if you would make a note for an item for a future agenda item, discussion on water and sewer rates.
Mhm.
I think would be apropos to have that discussion in the next month.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Anything further on the town manager's report? Thank you very much. Moving on, we have 3 sets of minutes this evening.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Anderson,
I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of March 27th, 2023.
thank you.
Second?
Made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Amy, you weren't there, so you're going to abstain?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay. Thank you. Then we have the regular meeting minutes of April 24th.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Anderson,
I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of April 24th, 2023.
Second?
thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And then we have the meeting minutes of April 27th, 2023.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Anderson,
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of April 27th, 2023.
Second?
thank you. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay, our next meeting, will there be a Board of Selectmen meeting at 6:30 Monday night prior to town meeting?
As needed, I don't think we have anything pressing. If something changes, we'll let you know.
Okay. So, at the moment, our next scheduled meeting is
May 22nd?
May 22nd. Thank you. I was going to say 2 weeks from this evening. We do have executive session this evening. I move that we go into executive session under Mass General Law 30A, Section 21A, Number 2, to discuss strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, and to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. Subject is town manager.
Second.
Thank you, made and seconded. Roll call vote.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mrs.
Are we
Anderson.
supposed to say in the will convene in open session?
Oh, thank you. And we will reconvene in open session for the sole purpose of adjournment. Is the seconder of the motion okay with that amendment?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Salter?
Aye.
Mr. Ward?
Aye.
Mrs. Lapointe?
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We are in executive session at 8:10. Thank you very much.